Democrats have outlined a con job like Schiff. He has said that he's leaving the witnesses' decision. So we're going to listen in. The president speaking right now.
It's taking place, wasting time in Washington. And I watched, they don't talk about my conversation. They don't talk about my transcripts. Remember this, when Schiff made up the phony story and he repeated it to Congress and the world, and it was a totally phony story, then I released the transcript. There was supposed to be a second whistleblower. What happened to him? There was, wait, otherwise I won't do your show. Wait, there was supposed to be an informer. What happened to the informer? All of these people disappeared. And when they saw this transcript, they said, we got problems. But they went ahead because they were already there, because they had a phony, concocted story made up. So here's the story. Did nothing wrong. It was a perfect conversation. It was totally appropriate. The best lawyers in the world have looked at it. The Department of Justice has looked at it, given it a sign-off. There was nothing wrong. They never thought I was going to release the conversation. They probably didn't think we had transcribers or we had it transcribed or taped, but they never thought we were going to release it. When we released that conversation, all hell broke out with the Democrats because they say, wait a minute, this is much different than Shifty Schiff told us. So we're doing very well. I got to watch enough. I thought our team did a very good job, but honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
I ask you because your attorneys say it's not. Alan Dershowitz says the framers of the Constitution did not permit impeachment on grounds like abuse of power or obstruction. They object with open-ended vague criteria. So for future presidents, is abuse of power an impeachable offense?
Well, it depends, but if you take a look at this, and from what everybody tells me, all I do is, I'm honest, I make great deals.
That's the point that they're trying to make, Mr. President. You just made reference to the fact that you have all the material. They want the material so that they can proceed in a well divided, equal court system to where they get the material, they get the witnesses, to where everybody can be on the same playing field. You don't want to be on the same playing field. And because you don't want to be on the same playing field means that you are holding out to your strategy of persuasion. Your strategy of persuasion.
I've made great deals for our country. Now we're working with the WTO. You're probably surprised by that, but there's been a long-term abusive situation to the U.S. I make great deals for our country, and they're honest deals. And when you read that transcription, and by the way, it wasn't one call, it was two calls. Nobody likes to talk about that. There was one call which was perfect, and then there was a second call, I guess a couple of months later, which was perfect. The president of Ukraine said it was perfect. The foreign minister of Ukraine said it was perfect. So if we have a transcription, we have the call, and we have the person on the other side of the call saying it was good. Now here's the other thing. They got their money long before schedule. They got all their money. What nobody says is very important to me. Why isn't Germany paying? Why isn't UK paying? Why isn't France paying? Why aren't the European nations paying? Why is it always the sucker, United States? That's one. And the other thing I wanted to check very carefully, and it's very important, is corruption. And we do that too. This was a perfect call. And
all right, Willie, guys, more of the same. We've heard it all before, but it's pretty remarkable. The president declaring his version of I am not a crook says, I'm honest. Of course, the count now on verified lies since the beginning of the Trump administration is now over 16,000, according to the Washington Post fact checker. He says he makes great deals. That speaks for itself. A man who's gone bankrupt time and time again and continues to be mired in North Korean missile deal where he was made to look like a complete fool. He also, it is interesting, he keeps talking about relief.
but they have to treat us fairly. The European Union was formed pretty much for this reason, I suspect. You know, if you really think about it, why was it formed? They formed their airplane company, which does very nicely, and now is doing better than ever because Boeing has not had a good time of it. They better start recovering fast. I hope they do. They have some good people in there now. They have great people in the company, but they have some good people leading it now. So hopefully that'll be taken care of. But I know I have a date in my mind, and it's a fairly quick date. And if we're unable to make a deal, then we'll do even better. We'll do even better. But they haven't treated us right. Look, the United States has been losing 150 billion and more for many years. 150 billion. More. I mean, really more than that with the European Union. They have trade barriers where you can't trade. They have tariffs all over the place. They make it impossible. They are frankly more difficult to do business with than China. We have a great relationship with China now. We had some testy moments, very testy, beyond testy. Worse than a lot of people would understand, but we got it done, and I think phase 2 will go nicely also. But with the European Union, and frankly, I'll be honest, I wanted to wait till I finished China before I went to work on, respectfully, Europe. But Europe, you know, is so beautiful. I guess a lot of us come indirectly from Europe. Isn't that nice? But they are actually more difficult to do business with than China. All you have to do is ask Boris. But I think Boris is going to be okay, too. I think he's going to come out great. I think he had a lot of guts. He's done a terrific job. I think he's in a good position, which they would have never been able to do before Boris. I have a date. I have a very specific date in my mind.
Before or after the election?
Before. I think we'll have a deal before.
With the EU?
Yeah, I think so. And they have to do that. I mean, I don't want to, look, I'm not saying it from strength or from weakness. I'm just saying they have to do it. They wanted to make a deal. Our nation, our country, wanted to make a deal under President Obama. The EU refused to talk to him. And then they said, no, we like it the way it is. Of course they like it the way it is. They're making 150 billion plus, right? And as you know, President Bush was desperate to make a deal. They wouldn't even talk to him. Me, they're talking to. And we'll have a deal. If we don't have a deal, we'll do even better.
Yes, is it true that you're considering extending the travel ban, and if so, to
Yes.
which countries?
So we have a travel ban. It's a very powerful ban. And a lot of, I heard a reporter recently say, he lost the ban in court. They didn't say that we won it in the Supreme Court. I'd say that's a little deceptive, John, wouldn't you? He said he lost the travel ban. I didn't lose the travel ban. The travel ban was lost in the lower courts and won in the Supreme Court 2 years ago. No, we're adding a couple of countries to it. We have to be safe. Our country has to be safe. You see what's going on in the world. Our country has to be safe. So we have a very strong travel ban, and we'll be adding a few countries to it.
Can you give us a hint about the region or the country?
Well, it's going to be announced very shortly. Okay?
Mr. President.
John.
President.
John.
Thank you, Mr. President. In regards to the proceedings going on in the Senate, would you like to see this over quickly? Would you like to see a thorough examination of the facts? What did you make of the dust-up between the White House counsel Pat Cipollone and Gerald Nadler last night? And are you absolutely against John Bolton testifying?
Well, you're asking a lot of questions. First of all, Gerald Nadler, I've known him a long time. He's a sleazebag. Everybody knows that. Pat Cipollone is a high-quality human being. I was very impressed with Pat. He had great emotion yesterday. Pat's a brilliant guy, but I've never seen that emotion. And that's real emotion. That's because he knows this is a hoax. And I was very proud of the job he did. I've known Jerry Nadler for a long time. He's opposed many of my jobs. I got them all built, very successfully built in New York. But so we have yet another fight. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it surprising? Isn't it amazing? But if you look at other aspects or other parts of your question, I think that I would rather go the long way. I would rather interview Bolton. I would rather interview a lot of people. The problem with John is that it's a national security problem. You can't have somebody who's at national security And if you think about it, John, he knows some of my thoughts. He knows what I think about leaders. What happens if he reveals what I think about a certain leader and it's not very positive, and then I have to deal on behalf of the country? It's going to be very hard. It's going to make the job very hard. He knows other things, and I don't know if we left on the best of terms. I would say probably not, and so you don't like people testifying when they didn't leave on good terms, and that was due to me, not due to him. And so we'll see what happens. But when you have a national security, you could call it presidential prerogative. You could just call it, the way I look at it, I call it national security for national security reasons. Executive privilege, they say. So that John would certainly fit into that. When you're a national security advisor, like this gentleman is doing a fantastic job, Robert, I just think it's very hard. And I've always gotten along. I've actually gotten along with John Bolton. He didn't get along with other people, a lot of other people, but when he knows my thoughts on certain people and other governments, and we're talking about massive trade deals and war and peace and all these different things that we talk about, that's really a very important national security problem. I think having somebody, other people, Mick Mulvaney is probably around here someplace. I'd love to have Mick go, but I think that he's really expressed himself very well when he did a Chris Wallace interview. That was a very, very powerful interview. That was a long, tough. Chris is a tough interviewer, a very talented guy, and I think there's not much he can add. He's been great. I would like to have. I'll tell you what I don't like, though. I'd love to have Mike Pompeo testify. But again, that's a national security problem. But I'd love to have Mike Pompeo, but it's a national security problem. I'd love to have Rick Perry. Rick Perry has asked me, I'd love to testify. Please let me testify, because he knows this is all a hoax. He understands it better than most. And Rick Perry would love to testify. But we're dealing with national security. We're dealing with one other thing. Our country's been tied up with this hoax from the day I came down the escalator. We've been fighting it. I've been fighting it from the day I've been elected. I would say probably long before. It could be long before I came down the escalator. That some people have said that, which is hard to believe. Wait, John. It's hard to believe. We've been fighting this. I would rather have, personally, I'd rather go the...
I want to weigh in right there. He keeps saying what we're dealing with, what we're dealing with, what we're dealing with. Has the president never thought about how we feel about what we're dealing with pertaining to a president that is possibly undermining not only the American people, but trying to undermine the defense of not being truthful about why he decided to withhold that Ukraine aid to the Ukrainians? Has he not never thought about our feelings towards what we feel and what we see? Let's back it up one more time and listen to it again, because it's almost reached a point of rambling right here. Please listen.
It's horrible.
Maybe he's got jet lag. I don't know.
Other people, Mick Mulvaney is probably around here someplace. I'd love to have Mick go, but I think that he's really expressed himself very well when he did a Chris Wallace interview. That was a very, very powerful interview. That was a long, tough. Chris is a tough interviewer, a very talented guy. And I think there's not much he can add. He's been great. I would like to have, I'll tell you what I don't like, though. I'd love to have Mike Pompeo testify. But again, that's a national security problem. But I'd love to have Mike Pompeo, but it's a national security problem. I'd love to have Rick Perry. Rick Perry has asked me, I'd love to testify. Please let me testify, because he knows this is all a hoax. He understands it better than most. And Rick Perry would love to testify. But we're dealing with national security. We're dealing with one other thing. Our country's been tied up with this hoax from the day I came down the escalator. We've been fighting it. I've been fighting it from the day I've been elected. I would say probably long before, it could be long before I came down the escalator. That some people have said that, which is hard to believe. Wait, John. It's hard to believe. We've been fighting this. I would rather have, personally, I'd rather go the long route. It's horrible for our country. Our country has to get back to business. We have people that are corrupt, like Adam Schiff, who misquotes, I don't mean misquotes, makes up a statement. He had no idea that I was going to release the transcript. He never thought I'd do that. And for that, I thank the president of Ukraine, because we got their approval. He had no idea I was going to do that. But these are corrupt people, some of them. And some of them are just playing the political game. But if you look at the poll numbers, my poll numbers are the highest they've ever been. If you look at the funding numbers, if you look at what the money raised by the Republican Party has just set a record. Nobody's ever done this before. It's because of the impeachment hoax.
Sorry. I've got 3 quick ones too, Mr. President, if you don't mind.
3?
3, yes. Well, my husband has 3.
That means 6.
No,
6 for the family.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Go ahead.
appreciating your family. Do you plan to show up in any way, shape, or form at your trial? Number 2, you called Kenneth Starr a disaster in the past. Do you still feel that way about him now? And 3, Lev Parnas has come forward and said that you knew everything that he was doing in your
He's a con man. Okay.
so
Ready?
you're
Let me
saying
answer
that's
that one.
not true?
I don't know him.
Okay,
Other than he's sort of like a groupie. He shows up at fundraisers. Okay, so I don't know anything about him. I watched Rudy. Rudy is a terrific person, great crime fighter, the best mayor in the history of New York City by far, solved the crime problem in New York. And I think it's very unfair the way the media has treated Rudy Giuliani. I will say this. Parnas, I don't know, other than he probably contributed to the campaign along with tens of thousands of other people. And I was this weekend, I was taking pictures with hundreds of people. They contribute to the Republican Party, and I stand there and I take pictures, and every once in a while I look at somebody, I say, gee, I wonder when that picture is going to be in the New York Times or the Washington Post or on Fox. So it's one of those things. I think Rudy is a high quality person.
So why is he not on your legal team? Why is he
Because
not?
I don't want there to be a conflict. I'd love to have Rudy on my team, but he could be a witness at some point if this whole sham continues. I would love to have Rudy on the team. Rudy
was at the right place at the right time pertaining to a high-profile situation of the 9/11 Twin Towers fallen. Rudy was at the right place at the right time, and if the truth be known, the reason why the crime problem got fixed was because the people fixed the problem themselves. In other words, if you go through a certain amount of time, the problem will basically fix itself. So Rudy was at the right place at the right time pertaining to a highly sensitive, high-profile case pertaining to 9/11. That's the reason why Rudy Giuliani becomes such of a known figure in the eyes of the world. Whenever Donald Trump talks about Rudy Giuliani, you would think that he was talking about Jesus Christ himself. And there is a lot of people, in a lot of people's opinions about Rudy Giuliani, that are stained, smeared, and the opposite of what the president tries to put him on a pedestal of. I just wanted to throw that in there edgewise pertaining to Rudy Giuliani. He was at the right place at the right time. He was the right person to handle the situation, and it evolved to where he is today. And a lot of times we know this as businesses in a successful business, whether or not you're on this corner or that corner, or you're on this side of town or the other side of town, it makes a big difference towards being at the right place at the right time, towards being a successful business. Granted, there are some businesses out there that no matter what side of town that they're on, they're not going to be successful because they have poor workmanship, their quality is bad, et cetera, et cetera. But Rudy Giuliani was one of those people, I truly believe, that was at the right place at the right time that put him on a pedestal that evolved to where he is today.
My team, just so you understand. But I'd love to have him up there. But it could be that he'd have a conflict. It could be. But Rudy Giuliani is somebody that I think the press has been very unfair to. Greatest mayor in the history of New York. Think of it. And one of the greatest crime fighters of the last 100 years. And he hates to see what's happening because he knows corruption really better than anybody.
He's not a JF.
Okay, go ahead.
He's not a JF.
So Ken Starr is a terrific man. I did make that statement because, frankly, I didn't think that Bill Clinton should have been impeached. And I thought it was terrible. I didn't know Ken Starr, but I didn't think that Bill Clinton should be impeached, should have been impeached. And I was pretty vocal about that.
See, that speaks volumes about our president's demeanor of how he looks at justice versus corruption, of making such of a statement about somebody that we know that not only got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, but then turned around and lied to the American people. So that tells you his demeanor towards how he feels about justice, what's right and what's wrong, by making the statement that he just made about Bill Clinton.
I didn't know Ken, but what I did know is he was very smart, he was very tough, he was very talented, but in a certain way I was sticking up for Clinton, for Bill Clinton. And, I sort of still feel that way. I mean, what he did was nothing good. There was a lot of lying going on. There were a lot of things, a lot of bad things. Now, with me, there's no lying. There's no nothing. They have nothing. They don't even have a crime. They say there's the only one that's ever been impeached, and he didn't commit a crime. I didn't commit a crime. And then you get into high crimes and misdemeanors. But I didn't commit a crime.
That's your opinion. It's very obvious that other people has opinions that contradict your opinion, Mr. President.
So, no, I have great respect for Ken, but I didn't think, frankly, that Bill Clinton should have been impeached.
So what do you think? Will you show up at your trial any day?
I'd love to go. Wouldn't that be great?
So
Wouldn't
why
that be
don't you go?
beautiful? I don't know. I'd sort of love to sit right in the front row and stare at their corrupt faces. I'd love to do it.
So why not commit
I don't know.
suicide?
Don't keep talking because you may convince me to do it.
Do you think Cipollone and Cephalo would want you there?
I think they might have a problem.
Mr. President.
I think they might. And by the way, I think they've done a really good job. And I think the other side has so lied. I watched the lies from Adam Schiff. He'll stand, he'll look at a microphone, and he'll talk like he's so aggrieved. These two guys, these are major sleazebags. They're very dishonest people. Very, very dishonest people. When somebody will make up a statement that I made, when you remember the statement 8 times, quid pro quo, 8 times. Think of it. How can you say 8 times? That would mean I was asking somebody 8 different times for the same thing. What kind of a conversation would that be? If you asked once, that'd be fine. If you asked twice, that'd be. How can you ask 8 times? They would say you're a Looney Tune, right? And then he said, I think he finished by saying, "Don't call me, I'll call you." Then I said that. He made that statement. Don't call me, I'll call you. And he didn't say he made it up. Now, ultimately, he had to, in a sense, apologize. He can hardly apologize, but he had to apologize because, fortunately, we had a tape. We had the transcripts. I am so happy that I had the transcripts because it showed he's a liar and he's a fraud. And they continue to just go on and on. But this has happened to me with the Russian hoax. This has happened to me. I called it the witch hunt, greatest witch hunt in American history. And the Mueller report, which exonerated totally. There was no collusion after all that. 2 years, there was no collusion. And then what happened? Jill Stein from the Green Party gets called a Russian agent by Crooked Hillary. And then Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know either of them, but I know they're not Russian agents, gets called a Russian agent. This is what these people do. They demean, and the press plays in because the press largely is their partner. And you know, one thing, if we could straighten out the press in our country, we would we would have a place that would be so incredible. The press is so dishonest, so corrupt. I read it all the time. Stories. I don't mind bad stories when I deserve bad stories sometimes. But when I do something great or good, let it be written about good. Same thing with other people. The corruption in the media, as I call it, the fake news media, is unbelievable. And
The part that he just talked about with the media, I see the media as the churches that are spread all over America. And whenever I say churches, I'm talking about various private, various corporate entities, regardless whether it's Baptist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, Church of Christ, Church of God, Presbyterian, Jehovah's Witness, Lutherans, I could go on and on. That each church building, each church group has a different interpretation of the Bible. And it may not be but one sentence or even one word off of what one group thinks versus another group thinks. But the fact of the matter is, it's mass hysteria. If you look at each independent church group of how each one of them has interpreted the Bible and thinks a little different than the other. I look at the media similar towards all these church groups. The media has different interpretations of various headline news articles that are going on. When Donald J. Trump was impeached on 2 accounts, the media pulled together that night to where the next morning every major news entity in this country, it didn't matter if it was from New York, it didn't matter if it was from LA, it didn't matter if it was from Atlanta, it didn't matter if it was St. Louis, it didn't matter if it was from Houston, it didn't matter if it was from Dallas, it didn't matter if it was from Miami. Every news entity in the country had the exact same headlines, which was Donald Trump has been impeached. That was the only time that I've ever seen the media conform together, and them all having the same opinion about the same subject at the same time. Now you may say, well, what's that got to do with the church? According to the teachings of Christ, of Him being the head cornerstone, there is only one true church of Christ. All these other temporal matters in people wanting to argue over stuff that is temporal is just exactly that. It's temporal. Even the disciples, during the time that Jesus was alive and with us and walking upon to the planet, wanted to pray fire down upon to a person's head to consume him because they didn't understand this particular person. Maybe it was because this particular person didn't run with the 12 disciples. I don't know. But Jesus looked at them and said, "You knoweth not what spirit you're from. For he that is with me cannot be against me." All this arguing and bickering over this church not following these guidelines or this church not interpreting this scripture in this way is basically all temporal. These are temporal human characteristics that the humans somehow or another take pleasure in arguing and feuding and fighting over. The same way with the media. The media finds stuff that is temporal, and they find pleasure in feuding and arguing and bickering over stuff that really don't matter to begin with, because it's temporal. That's what has caused the confusion in which the Bible clarifies who the author of confusion is. And it's not God, but it's Satan who is the author of confusion. And it doesn't matter if he's the author of confusion in corporate affairs. It doesn't matter if he's the author of confusion in political affairs. It doesn't matter if he's the author of confusion in spiritual affairs. Satan has bewildered and confused the majority of the American people, regardless of what entity that we're talking about. And that's the reason why that we have so many people pulling in so many different directions that they basically don't know their asses from their hole in the ground. Because you got too many chiefs and not enough Indians. This thing called democracy is a good, fair deal as long as you can keep it. But whenever you have more Indians than you have chiefs, and when you have the Indians that's no longer respecting the chiefs, then you run into chaos. You run into anarchy. The same way that we're running into right now. Naturally, this president is not going to volunteer towards telling the American people that he withheld precious aid from the Ukrainian people based around his own personal concepts towards against his rival or his opponent, the Bidens. Now, if he could approach that same subject in a manner that was justifiable in saying, well, the reason why that we done what we done or I done what I done was because of this, and this, then maybe the American people would listen to him. But whenever you sustain, retract, whenever you suppress all information out there to the American people, now you leave everybody out there wandering around. Well, what the heck's with this? He ain't even offering any type of defense towards why he done what he done. We know that he done it. Now, why did he do it? So it's a game, it's a strategy game being played by the American president, and he hopes that eventually he'll wear the American people out, he'll wear the media out to the point that everybody throws up their hands and says, well, I guess it must have been that way, and people will give up on seeking the truth towards what his true innermost motivations or his hidden agendas was. But I got news for you, Mr. President. There's people out there that are on to you in your game strategy, in your tactics that you're using towards wanting to manipulate the American people. And there's no doubt you've done some great things. You've done some marvelous things towards bringing things out to the American people in the regard towards bringing limelight to this situation, limelight to this situation. You've done some magnificent, marvelous things that other presidents would not have never achieved. But if you have made a mistake, if you have done something towards crossing the red line, the best, easiest, appropriate way to get out of that is to reflect back to the old saying about the Bible, which is honesty is the best policy. And if you can find that in your heart, in admitting the truth to the American people pertaining to the guidelines of the policies of this, that honesty is the best policy, you may find enough people out there that will have empathy or sympathy towards what you've done in the way that you've done it, to the point that they will be willing to pardon you of your errors, because the best that any of us can hope for as we go through life, and I'll tell anybody this, we all have good qualities, we all have bad qualities. Ultimately, in the end, whenever we finally reach that pivotal moment of saying goodbye, our farewells to the rest of the world, the best that any of us can hope for is that our good qualities have outweighed our bad. Our good qualities will outweigh our bad. And that's with any of us. But once more, you get to looking at beauties in the eyes of the beholder, and you get to looking at, well, what validates one's good qualities. Because one person may think that his qualities is good to bring rock and roll into the atmosphere more predominantly, to where another may think by bringing gospel music into the arena is more predominant into the arena, is more of a good quality. So once more, you have to reflect upon your qualities, and you pray to God every day that your good qualities will outweigh your bad on an hour-to-hour, day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year, and eventually decade-to-decade, and the span of your whole life. That what that you have done with people, for people, in having good, sound motivations, that your good qualities will outweigh your bad. And hopefully that's how we'll all be judged eventually, when we stand in front of the great Creator in the great white throne judgment, and he'll look at us and say, well done, thy good and faithful servant, well done, rather than hear him say, depart from me, for I have never known thee. That's my opinion. My opinion didn't cost you a thing, other than to use a little bit of time to sit and listen to my opinion about good qualities.
Hopefully, great or good, let it.
Once more, to me, it almost sounds like a president in desperation, that he's rambling the way that he goes on and on and on with some of his rants that he's talking to the media right now over in Switzerland.
It be written about good. Same thing with other people. The corruption in the media, as I call it, the fake news media, is unbelievable. And hopefully everybody's going to sort of learn a lesson. People got Pulitzer Prizes for their coverage of me, and it turned out they were totally wrong. Other people, Sean Hannity, Rushbo, a lot of great people, a lot of great writers, they got it right. They didn't get Pulitzer Prizes, but they got it right. The Russian hoax was a terrible thing. The dossier was a phony deal paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC and used in the FISA coup. It's totally illegally. No, it's a terrible thing that happened. This was a takedown attempt at a sitting president of the United States, and we caught them. So let's see what happens.
Mr. President, would you consider delaying the State of the Union if the impeachment trial does not?
I don't see it. No, I don't see it. No, a very excellent writer, Bob Woodward. I guess he's doing another book on Trump, but this time I'll actually give him an interview. He said, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm not enjoying it." He said, "No, you act like you're winning and you won. You're actually enjoying it." I said, "I'm not enjoying it. I'm doing it because it's very important what I'm doing. I consider what I've done here with this whole witch hunt from day one, with the insurance policy, with the horrible statements made between Strzok and Page and McCabe and Comey, who lied to Congress and did so many other bad things. He lied and he leaked. When I finish, I think that this is going to go down as one of the greatest things I've done for our country. These are bad, corrupt people. These are bad people and very bad for our country. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You have to ask yourself the question, or I do, in regard to this fiasco that's come up here in America in the past few months. By looking at the numbers of us being $23 trillion in debt, all the other problems that has just recently surfaced to the point that people now are paying more attention to, realizing the stakes that are so high. In the past few administrations, going all the way back to the Reagan administration, Mr. Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the other Bush administration, the Obama administration, which covers about 5 administrations. You have to ask yourself the question, out of all these people that has been in charge of government affairs, has any of these people really had the American interest at heart towards wanting to do what was right for the American people, as far as people caring about we, the taxpayers? I think it boils down to the word care. You know, they want to put on this big show, regardless whether it's Republicans or Democrats. Oh, we care about the roads. Oh, we care about education. Oh, we care about public this. Oh, we care about health care. Oh, we care about the national deficit. Oh, we care about the illegal immigrants that's coming over here illegally. Because they know they're tapping in on the things that the American people care about. The American people care about their own personal lives, towards how can they thrive as a unit, a family unit, and deal with the problems at hand over the span of 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 years. And eventually, once they have succeeded in their labor workforce achievements, they would like to be able to live out the remaining golden years in some sort of a comfort, peaceful, harmony zone, to the point that they don't have to work on an assembly line until they actually just drop. In other words, they want to believe that out of the span of their lifetime, they have achieved some sort of pleasure in being able to enjoy that pleasure at the span of their lifetime. And they want to be able to do this with an open, free, fair conscience. That they don't have to go to bed worrying about that they squandered, hoodooed, hurt, manipulated some individual to have what they have. That's been the American dream. The American dream has been torn apart because of the wealthy and the rich that now plays on two completely, totally different platforms. You have the platform of the wealthy that has already become successful, and a lot of them have become successful illegitimately, in illegitimate ways. And then you have the platform of the labor platform that is steadily deteriorating on a day-to-day basis to the point that the American dream has almost become nothing more than a wish. It's almost as if it has been turned into a fairy tale pertaining to the American dream of being able to work 30, 40, 50, even 60 years and then enjoying your remaining golden years here up onto this planet before you tell everybody sayonara, see ya, adios. This struggle between the 1%ers and the 99%ers is very obvious of the wealthy and the rich that is preying on the backs of the working class citizens. Not just here in America, but in Europe and in all other places throughout the world. Now they can call our system a free, open, fair democracy if they want to, based around communism and the communism system over in Russia and China. But whenever you get to looking at the unfairness, is one really any other unfair than the other of how that they have manipulated the system to the point that now the rich take care of the rich and the working class and the poor class basically falls through the gaps to the point that there is no hope that they will be able to ever live out their remaining golden years, not only here in America but throughout the planet. Honesty has always been the best policy. And whenever you're dealing with such of a powerful, powerful entity as the wealthy and the rich that have basically taken control of the world affairs, taken control of the media, taken control of our politics, and yes, to some extent, even taken control of the churches, that has formigated so much confusion. It has put all of us in great peril because of this. It is so sad in 2020, the 21st century that we're in right now. It is so sad that this has all been the recourse. This has all been the consequences of what didn't go on that should have went on during the Reagan administration, going all the way back to 1983 and 1988, pertaining to the Antichrist, pertaining to the two witnesses, pertaining to the opening of the seals, pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy. It is so sad that it has put the world in jeopardy, other than, of course, the wealthiest of the wealthy, the richest of the rich. So sad. So sad.
A smorgasbord, if you like, of issues, starting, of course, with the economy, the strength of the U.S. economy, and then going on to...
These wealthy people will get on TV and they'll try to convince us that they care. That they care about the layman. They care about the poor man. They care about the uneducated person. They care about the young girl who's been impregnated by a boy that didn't have no true feelings for her, that is now struggling towards raising a family by herself. They'll get on TV and they'll say that they care. But it's obvious what we have seen a pattern of again and again and again, of regardless of what administration was in power, who they actually care about. They care about themselves. They care about padding their own pockets. They care about what's in it for them and not what's in it for us. It is so sickening as I sit and look and weep and cry, and my heart breaks of watching these occurrences happening in front of our eyes. It is so sickening. It is absolutely so sickening to watch how selfish and greedy people truly are.
Talk about the impeachment trial, which he describes as a hoax, but saying he's satisfied with the way his legal team is performing. And then all the other issues, the fake news media, on and on he went. Interestingly, he appeared there with the head of the World Trade Organization, who he co-opted to say a few words, which was interesting in its own right, because he's a high critic of the WTO. So clearly he's made some progress there. Nina dos Santos is with us. What grabbed you from the whole of that press conference?
Well, obviously, towards the end, as we know, he talked about the order of the day, which is impeachment, which many people might say he's here to avoid because his intervention in Davos came on the first day of the impeachment trial in the Senate. That obviously was interesting in terms of US politics, but what was interesting was that, as you said, the theatre of the moment where you had the head of the WTO, a body that the United States has systematically attacked the way how it works, and to an extent where some people are even asking whether or not this body is relevant, he brought him into the fold and gave him a chunk of time to explain that they saw eye to eye on a few things, Richard. The reason why this is important is because the United States...
It looks like he might have stopped them talking again.
We should listen in then.
Yep.
The day I got elected, this was going on. And you look at Congressman Al Green, he said the only way we can win is to impeach him. And he meant it, too. He meant it. He shouldn't have said it from his standpoint, but he meant it. No. And I have to say Davos was great, and we appreciate the tremendous support. We've had a tremendous time, and really was a great experience. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excuse me, have a bit of a chill. And there we have the president continuing to walk out and leave. He leaves from Marine One, goes to Zurich Airport, and then straight back to Washington, where he's due back in Washington sometime in the late afternoon and the early evening.
Yes, and it's looking as though actually he's running about 16 minutes over schedule, because that was quite a lengthy press conference, as I say before. A few minutes of it taken up by the head of the WTO, who the United States has clashed with so much. The reason why that's important is because at the end of last year, the United States dug its heels in and prevented the WTO from putting more judges on its boards, which meant that dispute resolutions can't go through that traditional body anymore.
But the fascinating part is that the president has managed to co-opt the WTO back into some idea of reform, and yet at the same time he